welcome to the Album Man, and today I'm going to be starting a new series called Review Rewind, and this should have been done a bit ago, but it's being done now, so you're just going to have to accept that. And basically in this series I will recap over some of the previous month's albums that I didn't review either, because I didn't feel that it was a good use of my time to dedicate a whole 10-minute video, or I just didn't have that much to say on the album, but I still want to cover them. Maybe they're so obscure I just didn't think anyone would really watch the video. So I decided to do this series. Some of you may remember my review roundup series from a long time ago. This is a bit like that, but instead we're going to take a look at 5 albums just from January, so they're more relevant, maybe of more interest to you, and it's going to be a mixture of more underground obscure stuff and some stuff that people have wanted me to talk about. And one thing before we get into the 5 of an album I won't be covering, which some people may have hoped I would. I'm not going to talk about the Blind Guardian album. Let me just make my opinion on this very clear off the bat. I'm just sick of power metal. At the moment, I just can't stand it. And I used to review quite a few power metal bands. I just don't listen to it at all anymore. Aside from the odd bit of Halloween, not at all. I've listened to some of their new album. It seems good for what it is, that type of fantasy, epic power metal, but it's just a bit too overproduced, too bombastic and over the top for really what I'm wanting at the moment, so I'm not going to be talking about that. The first album we're going to be covering is definitely an interesting one. From the Very Depths by Venom. So Venom are, if you don't know who they are, they're a heavy British band. One of the pioneers of thrash metal, speed metal, of just faster, heavy-hitting metal. And of course of black metal. There are many actually dispute really how influential and how black metal their sound is. They certainly gave the genre its name and were an influence to really any forms of more extreme metal. And I think that comes some of the problems with Venom and today. Well, let me elaborate. Venom are just too often held to this impossibly high standard of what monolithic albums such as black metal and Welcome to Hell. I mean, we all know how crucial these albums were to thrash, speed, black, as I said, and any extreme form of metal. These were pioneering albums, okay? And, I mean, they haven't made anything else since that was quite as aggressive, raw, and, well, badly produced. In 2015, we find Venom as a different beast, Kronos being the only original member, and very modern production values. Everything actually sounds kind of nice. It doesn't sound as ugly and raw and as dark throne-y as black metal and Welcome to Hell did. But to me, I still feel they have at least some of what made Venom such a great band. And I do like From the Very Depths. I know it's received mixed reviews. A lot of Venom fans just shit on it and I can't stand it. There are some who've been praising it, and I'm definitely more towards the latter, though I don't think it's as great as black metal or Welcome to Hell, but they're never going to produce anything that good, and I think people just need to accept that. This is they've released a lot of albums. And, I mean, we look at the opener, From the Very Depths, and also Grinding Teeth and Long-Haired Punks. These in particular have blistering, high-octane guitar riffs with a thrash and punk energy about them, while delivering the type of metal what you want from a band of this nature. Though the problems is that this just can get rather repetitive and tired quite quickly. I mean, they do throw some more moderately paced ones in, such as Smoke, to keep the album from getting too stale, but at 51 minutes, this feels too long, and I often say between 45 and 50 minutes is an ideal length for an album, but when it comes to the more extreme forms of metal and things that get repetitive quickly, less is often more, and 35 to 40 minutes I find to become more ideal. And across 14 tracks as well, they really could have trimmed a few. And when it comes to reduction, this is always a big point for Venom fans. This definitely reminds me a lot of, take Testament's, I suppose, latest album, Dark Roots of the Earth. If you like the production on that, you probably like the production on this. And in fact, Kronos doesn't sound a million miles away to Chuck Billy, as the reviewer of Metal Couch stated. He was, when I listened to it, it's like, yeah, actually, I can definitely see that. I do find this album enjoyable. I do. It doesn't set the world on fire, it doesn't usher in a new era of metal, but it's fast, it's furious, and it's still kind of Venom. I'm going to give it a 6.75 out of 10. The World We Used to Know by Shattered Skies. These guys are an Irish sort of degen groove metal, prog metal band. I don't know how to describe them in one term, it's fairly difficult. And I was looking forward to their debut, I have to say, and I'll tell you why. Shattered Skies are a band I've seen twice live at Hard Rock Hell's prog festivals in both 2013 and 2014. And both times, I thought they were fairly interesting. They definitely kept me engaged throughout their set, and their blend of sort of gentler riffs with some prog metal and melody and groove to them, I found quite attractive. I mean, they are definitely gent influenced, but don't think they're completely degent. They're certainly not in an overbearing way like Meshuggah even, or sort of early Tesseract. Though their debut does definitely take these influences, it also blends them with some keyboards and synths sprinkled in, and the choruses at times wouldn't feel too out of place on a power metal album, if I'm going to be honest, with this sort of groove-laden riffage as well. I do think it's difficult to describe their sound. They definitely carve a sound of their own with this album. The problem is I can't say it's a sound I find massively impressive, and I found myself just generally underwhelmed by this release, and I have the unfortunate displeasure of saying this. I found that the singer's voice was just not strong enough to hold its own in the mix, and often just seemed to get washed away in the music, and the vocal melodies rarely stood out. Musically, a very personal gripe of mine, and this is just something that doesn't appeal to me in music that much, but I know it does to others, the all-out technicality of it. And yes, this is coming from a hardcore Dream Theater fan, I know, smell the irony, but I found the riffs at times were just a bit too much on the tech metal side for my taste, and the guitarists were clearly talented. Also, on the tech metal side, didn't exactly do anything that really blew my mind or really captivated me. I mean, if you take like a technical prog metal band, say Scale the Summit, who are instrumental bands, they're not my taste, but I can definitely recognise I'm just blown away when I listen to their guitarist. He's such an amazing talented guy, and the stuff he does on guitar, it's really, really good, and I just have so much respect for what that band does. But here, I just find the guitar doesn't do much for me. I feel just rather indifferent towards this release as a whole. I mean, to their credit, they have a load of musical diversity, and each track feels a bit different, and if you're into that form of prog, that type of tech metal, genty type thing, it may be worth a go, and you may find it up your alley. But for me, I just didn't quite. 5 out of 10 for Shattered Skies. And just before I jump into the next one, you may see there's a theme of not many of the albums here are particularly impressive. Don't think that's always going to be the case in this series, because it must be January, being the first month of the year. It's always quite slow. There were a few good releases which I did 4 album reviews for, but it just wasn't actually that much to cover in January. So this is not by any means going to be the case with future installments. It's not just focusing on mediocre albums at all. There can be very, very good albums in this series. Continuing. This is one I feel I have to talk about, but I'm not going to rate this album. This is just going to be more opinions on it than more of a review, I suppose. Periphery's Juggernaut, Alpha and Omega. I really feel I had to talk about this, because it was a fairly big and anticipated release, particularly in the prog metal sphere, which is one that I have a lot of love for. I have to say, the more degent side of prog metal at the moment turns me off faster than the prospect of sharing a bed with Susan Boyle. It really isn't up my alley. So it's hardly a surprise that I did not find Juggernaut to be that enjoyable. Sure, the cleaner sections were effective to an extent, but I'm not a big fan of the vocalist. I find his voice a little weak. and the vocal parts and clean parts often feel rather tame, and melodies like something I'd found on Kerrang TV. And then when they showed their true colours got heavier, I honestly found it kind of hideous. The growls just seemed unnecessary and an annoyance more than anything. I admit I didn't like this band when I saw them support Dream Theater back in 2012, I think, and I still don't. If you enjoyed this, more power to you. You know, please support the artist, enjoy them. But for me, if anyone was wondering, no, I don't like Periphery, and Juggernaut has done nothing to change my mind on that. Let's have a bit of sort of post, shall we? A bit of post-metal, post-rock. That sounds nice to me. And if you know my taste in music, you know I love post-metal. But I do think it's a very difficult genre to actually pull off successfully. There are very few bands who really manage to get that crucial mixture and balance, that yin and yang of crushing riffs, ethereal melodies and soaring crescendos without it becoming tedious or dull. Bands like Isis, The Ocean, Solstifier, Cult of Luna managed to pull this off brilliantly. But so often I find post-metal has a tendency to centre on a particular riff and kind of go on ad nausea on it. And where does, well, The Rift by Swarm of the Sun stand in all of this? This was an album I felt with a tremendous amount of promise. This is why I wanted to talk about it. From the opening reverberated, ominous piano on There's Blood on Your Hands to the swirling vortex of distortion in These Depths Were Always Made for Both of Us, this album has some truly breathtaking and amazing post-metal moments. The track Incarceration, especially its moody vocals, pommeling, crushing riffs in the crescendo, is mind-blowing. It's one of my favourite songs of the year so far. But these moments are just too far and few between, with many tracks and parts being far too ambient and directionless, distorted riffs that go nowhere, but seem to go on for quite a while. Again, like in a couple of albums we've covered as well, I do find the vocals a weak point here. I know I seem to be nitpicking and going on and on about vocals today, but hey, that's just a selection of albums we have to cover today. And, I mean, they're not too common, the vocals. The problem is that, well, I have nothing wrong with instrumental post-metal. I mean, I'll listen to the instrumental version of The Ocean's Pelagia if you want evidence of how instrumental post-metal can be freaking awesome. The musicianship, I feel, just needs to be a bit more diverse and expansive to justify the lack of vocals. And then when the vocals are there, they don't really add much. They lack really any strength or power and kind of just wash away in the instrumentation on a far too regular basis. Become no more than a faint whisper in your ear. Like, these guys are clearly talented, and it pains me because in moments this album really is something so special. It just is nowhere near consistent enough for me to recommend it highly, and is bogged down by so much unnecessary tedium. 6 out of 10 for A Swarm of the Sun. And lastly, shall we have a bit of traditional metal? Oh, I think so. We always like a bit of traditional metal around these parts. Identity by Alpha Tiger. So we have some traditional metal with a few power metal elements into the mix, and it's definitely inspired by the golden age of heavy metal, that classic 80s British scene. I suppose I would consider the golden age of it, well, what I suppose you would call the new wave of British heavy metal. And this album could fall under what is known as the new wave of traditional heavy metal scene, which is more of a modern scene, and has quite the number of good bands popping up over the years, delivering some interesting and fresh sounding takes on that old school metal sound. Bands that immediately spring to mind that are good at this. Enforcer have a new album out soon. Cauldron, a particularly good one. White Wizard, who of course are split up. Some of those really seem to be at the forefront of this revival scene. And while Alpha Tiger do deliver a somewhat enjoyable effort with identity, ironically the main issue with this is actually the sheer lack of identity they've carved here. While they tick all the requisite boxes for this style of music, they don't really add or do anything that hasn't been so done to death it feels like you're beating the most dead of horses. It doesn't even deliver riffs and choruses like some of the other bands that, well yeah, they kind of sound familiar and are a bit iterative. They're just so cool that you can't help but just feel like passing away to them. The melodic metal sensibilities definitely mean you have some fun listening to this one, but it does nothing to stand out. A plethora of similar bands coming out, Amulet are rising one in the UK for example, who have produced some interesting stuff, and I'll say, I think they have potential. Maybe they're capable of something really good. But this ain't it. But maybe a one to watch. So don't rule out Alpha Tiger yet. But at the moment, it's only a 5.5 out of 10. Okay, so this has been Review Rewind. I'd love to know some feedback on this, what you'd like me to do differently. And if one of those things is focus on more positive bands, yes, that will be happening in February. I can assure you with the February version, because there's some really good releases I'm going to be covering in the Review Rewind, so don't worry about that particular thing, but anything else I'd really love to know. This has been TheAIbumMan. Thanks for watching, comment, subscribe, and as usual, long live rock and roll.